that China's foreign ministry has been reacting to President Trump's policies on trade. Beijing says it's willing to strengthen dialogue and communication and wants to work towards stable, healthy and sustainable development of economic relations with the US. Well, Katrina Yu's joining us now from Beijing. Hashim, they're telling us that the Chinese Vice Premier is expected to be speaking in Davos. It's going to be interesting to hear what they have to say with regard to the Trump presidency. But talk us through what we've heard from China's Foreign Affairs Office.
I think China overall has been pretty positive but subdued when it comes to Trump taking office again. We had President Xi Jinping speak with Trump on Friday, and we had the same messages reflected by China's foreign ministry on Tuesday and also on Monday. And those messages are that this is an important relationship. Both sides want to strengthen dialogue, and China very much wants win-win cooperation with the Trump administration. I think it's also very clear that Beijing is holding its cards very close to its chest, waiting very much for Trump to make the first move, and especially waiting when it comes to tariffs. Of course, we've heard President Trump say that he's threatened 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports. That's, yes, in Beijing, and threaten those 60% tariffs on all Chinese goods. That's bad news for China. China's economy is slowing. China does not need those tariffs, and it signaled that it's open to doing a deal with President Trump to avoid those tariffs. And like many other countries, China is very much optimistic that Trump is going to be a pragmatist when it comes to doing its deals with Beijing, not going to really be interested in pushing for ideology when it comes to, for example, human rights, not going to be interested in forging diplomatic alliances to contain or to suppress China. So that's what the optimists here in Beijing are hoping for. But at the same time, they are suspecting that there could be a hostile Trump administration. Of course, we've seen Marco Rubio, for example, one of Trump's cabinet picks. He is very clearly a hawk towards China. During his first term in office, Beijing was caught somewhat off guard by some of Trump's moves, for example, starting that trade war in 2017. So this time, China, Xi Jinping, very much want to focus on portraying China as a strong country, sturdy country, prepared for whatever Trump throws at it. And to that end, we had President Xi Jinping today on Tuesday speak with Russia's leader, President Putin, saying that the Beijing-Moscow partnership is very strong, that will not be impacted by whatever happens in the US. And Beijing also, in the months leading up to Trump being inaugurated, has made this message clear that it wants to do a deal with Trump, but if it needs to, it will retaliate against the US and US firms.
Katrina Yu in Beijing. Katrina, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining us now is political economist David Mahon, live from Beijing. So thank you very much indeed for being with us. What's your assessment of China's position when it comes to a Trump administration?
There are some in the Chinese administration who believe that Trump will be transactional. I think the more realistic minds are seeing that people call Trump transactional as if he was a very successful businessman, when we know that he managed to go through many bankruptcies, leaving him with assets that he protected. He didn't pay tax. He didn't pay his offshore suppliers. He didn't pay laborers, building workers in America on many occasions. It's a kind of gangsterous form of business. So I think the realists here know that this is very unpredictable, and Trump will do whatever he feels is going to make him look strong, and he'll do whatever puts him in the limelight. There's not a lot of depth in his thinking around tariffs on China, or even the few things he said of some of the strategic concerns. So I think we're in for a bumpy ride.
The tariffs, of course, are going to be of prime concern, particularly to China. We're also waiting to see what, if anything, is going to be done about those. Katrina was just describing that, at least as far as the foreign ministry of China is concerned, they are open to doing some sort of deal with the Trump administration to avoid those tariffs. Nevertheless, of course, we're seeing negotiations in the US over TikTok as well. Is there a sense that the Chinese are waiting to see how the TikTok negotiations go to get a sense of how the Trump administration might be open to a deal?
I think that's a good point on TikTok. And I do believe that there are many interests in America who trade with China, major tech companies, even some of course, the bigger retailers in America. They don't want to see any tariffs because the last round of tariffs didn't have much effect on the Chinese economy. They had a greater effect on the American economy. Tariffs against China really form a type of regressive tax on American consumers. So for all Trump's bluster and all the things that he's stated, somehow this concept of 60% tariffs on a wide range of goods is so much against America's economic interest. I don't think we're going to see that. But it's the randomness and the unpredictability that concerns many in Beijing. The one thing I think they have identified correctly is that he's indifferent to most of these global crises. He just doesn't care. And so the Taiwan issue, I think, will be on a back seat, take a back seat for the next 4 years. I don't see tensions there ramping up at all. If anything, things might become more open for some kind of discussion. For the rest of it, Trump is trying to influence anywhere in the world he can to demonstrate American primacy domestically. And so we're going to see a lot of very random and rather ineffectual acts. Look, he's talking about annexing Greenland and invading the Panama to take back the canal, knowing that none of these things are actually possible. So there's a lot of bluff and bluster here. So I don't see great economic injury going forward. China's already been Trump-proofing as much as it can its economy, and it's done quite well.
I want to ask you, though, about there are kind of two elements of this, aren't there? There's the economic side that we've just been talking about in terms of trade. There is also, of course, the political and geopolitical side of this. And one would imagine that Trump is going to have to negotiate or at least engage with China, particularly when it comes, for example, to China's influence in North Korea, China's influence on Russia, and, of course, feeding that into Trump's aim to try to get some sort of a settlement to the war in Ukraine. How difficult do you think is it going to be for Trump to be able to make that connection with China and get them, if necessary, to put some influence on those two?
China's going to be very cooperative on any settlement with Ukraine. This war is not in its interests. It did see it initially as something that was going to distract America from putting more pressure on China, trying to contain it. And that didn't happen. If anything, America increased the pressure. So it doesn't really constitute the kind of distraction that Beijing expected it might. So any kind of resolution of the Russia-Ukraine war, China certainly will play along with that, as it will in anything to do with peace in the Middle East. China has been quietly supplying Gaza with tremendous volumes of aid, medical aid, food, since the Israeli invasion began. So there's a number of areas in the world where China does have an interest. The myth is that China has influence on North Korea. It doesn't. All China can do is supply North Korea with basic commodities to prevent it falling apart. China's as appalled at North Korea's nuclear program as any other country. So its ability to influence Kim Jong-un is very slight. I've been recently to North Korea and they don't like the Chinese. There's great resentment towards them. They see them as having betrayed the so-called communist cause. So Trump's going to struggle to get anything going there.
Right. David Mahon, we appreciate you being with us in Al Jazeera, giving us the benefit of your expertise in this. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.